100% surety send up a guided missile and expect that it's going to go through its operation and bring down a plane. Those things are just facts that we must face, and I think any scientist will tell you the same thing. We may, at some X number of years in the future, have a lot of guided missiles that can bring down planes. But then, also, we have to face the fact that an enemy is going to be developing its techniques. It's going to have guided missiles that will maybe outmaneuver ours. We don't know. That's always a race in any warfare between the type of weapon that one side uses and the type of weapon that the other side uses to combat it. We can never say for sure that we are not going to get planes over a target. All we know is that if we do get planes with atom bombs over our cities, even though they're very few, they can do so terrifically much damage that we've got to think about the consequences and we've got to prepare for that eventuality. I think that is the only logical way that we can live.
Very good. Let me interrupt here and remind our listeners with whom we are talking Turkey. They are Mrs. Rosser H. Matson, who is the co-director of Women's Division and Volunteer Manpower of the Bureau of Civil Defense. Also Mr. Reynolds Marchant, the co-director of the Bureau of Civil Defense, and Mrs. Olive Remington Goldman, who is also of the Federal Civil Defense Office and the United States representative to the United Nations on the status of women in the world. And if you have any questions for these people, phone them in to Maine 3101. This portion of the Let's Talk Turkey show being brought to you by Gardner Hardware. Wears like enamel, scrubbable like enamel. The entirely new type of wall paint now at Gardner Hardware, downtown Minneapolis. It's Scrubbable Flat, a product of the Boston Varnish Company. Scrubbable Flat is the one paint you can use on walls and woodwork. Covers everything, even gloss and high gloss enamel. You can keep those fresh-looking colors because you can scrub to your heart's content. You can't detract from the beautiful gloss finish of Scrubbable Flat. Just apply with a brush or roller and enjoy doing it, because Scrubbable Flat is odorless. It's a quick job, too. Drying time is just 2 hours, and you won't have any of those annoying brush streaks when you paint with Scrubbable Flat. In fact, you can even touch up your painted surfaces without leaving a trace of unevenness. Well, Gardner Hardware is so positive that you'll be absolutely delighted with Scrubbable Flat. They make this unusual guarantee. If you're not completely satisfied with your Scrubbable Flat from Gardner's, return the empty can, and Gardner Hardware will refund the full purchase price. So be sure to see the complete color range in Scrubbable Flat paints at Gardner Hardware, 311 Nicollet Avenue, Minneapolis, where there's always free convenient parking, rear of the store, while you shop. This is the Let's Talk Turkey show, coming to you over WDGY. St. Paul, Minneapolis, 1130 on your dial, originating from the famous 620 Club, where turkey is king. And, of course, any music heard on tonight's program comes to you by means of recording. Well, returning to our line of discussion there just a moment ago, a few weeks ago, we were visited in this town by Lieutenant General White of the Air Force, who spoke somewhat along the same lines, gave some very startling statistics on what he thought might happen in the event of a raid. He was quoting something like, say they sent over 100 bombers and very likely 80 would get through. And if 80 of them had atomic bombs or their other very high explosive bombs, you can imagine what the destruction would be. Well then, as you say, civil defense is facing this prospect, so I gather that they are not so much concerned with defending against the bombers as regaining their normal way of life following a disaster. Am I fumbling around a little too much on that, Mrs. Matson?
Well, I think particularly in cities, what we have to realize that if a bomb should hit us and we would try to run away from our post, it's just like in any branch of the service, that it's practically an act of treason. Our homes are going to be our front lines. The A-bomb is, as its number one target, civilians. And in order to get a city clothed and fed and people back to work and all, we all have to stay there and fight and face that possibility. The enemy would like nothing better than if we deserted our cities and left them idle. And also, the possibility of evacuation is an impossible one. It would just make us all shooting ducks, so to speak. It would cloud up the highways so that no ambulances, no rescue, no fire, nothing could get in. And so I think we have to go back to the very basic principle of knowing how to take care of ourselves and our really fundamental concept of living, of taking care of our the people that are close to us, and for the service, the warden service particularly, to take care of the block where the people live and know those people, know their habits, know everything and their resources, so that that block is able to take care of itself, and each family and each child knows exactly, and each wife, what to do in case of an emergency. And we'll all be there on the front lines. And that's what I think your answer is on really the cities are prime targets, and the people in the cities will have to know exactly what to do and be prepared.
You mentioned, I don't know that you put it that way, giving the enemy comfort in thinking that perhaps everybody would desert their homes. By the same token, if the enemy thought there was a good civil defense setup and that their initial attack would not be as successful as they would hope, it might be a deterring effect and follow in with our national policy of
Well, I feel that
containing.
because the minute you see or anyone sees and knows that like Manhattan has passed a successful test, a 3-minute test, and they did a perfect run on it, it's less likely to have an attack than some city that isn't prepared. I think it's a very great protective force for peace, to be prepared.
Probably, again, a part of our policy of containment. Well, now, we're not as highly developed in this business of civil defense as they are perhaps in England. We've heard a number of stories on that here on this platform. What can we do to reach that stage? Is it up to the women?
Well, I think the women have a great deal to do of it. You know, they say that the women will really have to fulfill between 60 and 75% of the jobs in civil defense. That means everything from wardens right up through to command posts often. Now, you've spoken of England a few moments ago. In England, the women started out as plane spotters, you know. But when the bombers came over, they were shooting down the planes themselves and shooting the anti-aircraft guns. This matter that Mrs. Matson spoke of, that we can't face a possibility of evacuation because that would play directly into an enemy's hands, was brought to my mind very vividly while I was in England doing work at the English Civil Defense Staff College for our government this last summer. For instance, I saw cities in England, parts of London too, where factories had been under fire, under bombardment, and perhaps lost their roofs, lost their sidewalls. They dug the machinery out of the rubble, they'd rigged tarpaulins, and had those very same factories producing again within 12 hours, and with their same crews back on the job. That's the kind of fight back, that's the kind of courage that made England stand up under it, and that would enable us to fight back and win a war if we had one. The responsibilities are pretty much home responsibilities, really. Now, you've been talking about the women's share in this thing. I think our women have got to learn that if an attack came, it's the women, it's the families that would have to save themselves and their neighbors and their city when it came down to that. For instance, we won't be able to depend upon our fire departments. Streets will be blocked so fire engines couldn't get through. It's we, the householders, would have to put out our own small fires. We wouldn't be able to get a doctor for our wounded children, for people who had been caught under in falling buildings. We'd have to know the kind of home service, the kind of first aid, which would save life right there on our own household. This business of fire, which is such a tremendous enemy, really kills more people than anything else in a bombing raid. You know, in Hamburg, they say it was between 45 and 60,000 people perished by fire in 10 days when our bombers went over in that great attack. And yet they say that fire might have been prevented if the people had stayed near home in spite of the bombing and put out their own fires so that they wouldn't have merged into that great bonfire that destroyed the whole city. It's a new conception, I suppose, going back really to the kind of self-help and mutual assistance we knew in pioneer days. But I liked the thing that you said a moment ago, Mr. Commentator, when you said that really this would be the greatest deterrent to war if we are well prepared. I agree with you and with Mrs. Matson that we're far less likely to be attacked if we are prepared to take it and to fight back. But unless we're prepared, I think we're wide open and we're very likely to be bombed, because the kind of enemy we face is one that wouldn't miss an opportunity to seize us if they could, unprepared.
Mrs. Goldman, or Mrs. Matson or Mr. Marchant, I don't mean this to be a loaded question at all, but throughout the conversation we've used the word if there's an attack, rather than when. Is that the psychology of the federal civil defense and the local civil defense departments? Is it always if?
I think it has to be if. Nobody can say what the future will be. There are some what we might call professional people who look into the future, but I'm sure that there are none of those in civil defense. I think we have to look at civil defense very much in the way we look at any other possible damaging. I think we have to look at civil defense as we look at any other activity which is set up to combat a major disaster. And to my mind, and I've tried to think along these lines because I think you have to get some facts and figures, civil defense is insurance. And as insurance, it may deter an enemy. It may make him weigh his decision to make an attack on us very much more carefully. But it will not absolutely prevent his making an attack on this country and doing a great deal of damage. But civil defense is the insurance that you set up to make the best of the situation after any such damage is done. And in that respect, it is like other insurance. It is specifically like fire insurance. People are accustomed to taking out fire insurance on their homes, not because they expect their homes to burn down. I think the if there is probably a very great if. And I know that I wouldn't do a lot of things in my own house if I knew that for certain that it was going to burn down. I don't ever expect my home to burn down. But if by some chance that should happen to my house, I carry insurance because it would be a very disastrous thing to me. Even though no lives were lost or anything of that sort would occur, it would be a very severe financial blow, one from which I would have a great deal of difficulty in recovering. Therefore, I think, as in any other insurance, civil defense is a good thing. I don't know whether your time is running too close here or not, but on this insurance parallel that I'm trying to draw, I think there are a few statistics that might be very, very interesting to people generally. Most of the people, as I mentioned, that have homes feel that they want to carry a fire insurance just on the if. Now, fire experience in St. Paul has shown over the past 5 years that there's approximately one chance in 170 of there being a serious fire in any one person's household within a year. One chance in 170. That means that 169 chances out of 170 are that you will not have a serious fire in your home. Yet people carry insurance because of that one chance in 170. Last year, Lloyd's of London was called upon to insure an international exhibit to be held in New York. The people who were sponsoring that exhibit wanted cancellation insurance in case of war because of the international character of the exhibit. Lloyd's gave them that insurance. And I think the odds would amaze you. Lloyd's gave this insurance based on one chance in 15. One chance in 15 of a war occurring within a 3-month period. We feel it good business sense to insure our homes on one chance in 170 that they will burn down. Are we fair in not looking accurately at a picture that stands before us? Civil defense is insurance again, and I think we need to consider it on a basis of figures, not just speculation.
Very good parallel. Although I think you'll agree, insurance, at least in my experience, it's not always the easiest thing to sell. It's probably just one of the very things that you're running up against in the way of civil defense.
That's right.
That's right. Well, now, Mrs. Goldman, you have a regional conference coming up in the month of November. Would you tell us something about that?
I'm delighted that you raised that question. Yes, on November 20th and 21st, this whole region, the 7 states, are going to have a conference on civil defense based on this matter of the public's participation with government in setting up efficient and overall defense for our homes for security. It's going to be at the Hotel Congress in Chicago. We're going to have some interesting national leaders there. Colonel Chambers, who's a Medal of Honor man, and our deputy director in Washington, Colonel Horton, who has been setting up the kind of rescue school where people learn how to dig victims trapped in ruins, to fight fires, do all the kind of difficult and complicated rescue work which will save lives. We're going to have 6 of our state directors speak, a number of directors from target cities, and section meetings on the welfare service, emergency feeding, emergency housing, all of the problems of civil defense. You know, it's rather grim, but also it's fascinating. And the planning has been done on the highest level by some of the best brains in this country. It's going to be an interesting conference, and I hope we'll have lots of attendance from this great state of Minnesota. May I add one word about that question of yours about the if or the when that the atom bomb might hit us? I double in a job of working on the United Nations, and I have the problem of being up against the communist delegates in my meeting. There are 3 delegates there from the communist countries and a commission of 18 members. In the last 2 years, I have found such a shocking step-up of the hate campaign against the democracies, against the United States in particular. The documents that come to my hand of the way they're teaching the children in the schools of Russia, the way they're talking to the workers, the things that they publish in their laws and their radio, in their daily press. There's a step-up of hate that's hard to understand unless they are preparing their people mentally for an attack upon the democracies. That is why, though I hope it is an if we are ever attacked, I cannot, from my contacts with the international field in the United Nations, feel that we can ignore the problem of when, because they act like a people that are hoping to attack us. They talk like a people that feel they cannot go on and get the kind of a world they want until they destroy the freedom-loving democracies. That's why I think there is right now a particular urgency about this thing that makes it come home to the man and woman in the street, to the men and women of our national organizations, and it puts a compulsion upon us to help such people as Mrs. Matson and Mr. Marchant to get the program really rolling here in the great target cities in the Midwest, which are so close to any enemy that wanted to drop an atom bomb over the Arctic route.
To use your own word, very grim, and to turn to the subject of civil defense, again, very fascinating, and we like to have the civil defense people here on this Let's Talk Turkey show. I want to thank all of you for coming up here this evening, have another guest we'd like to talk to, and of course, civil defense is, as I say, always welcome on the Let's Talk Turkey platform. Thanks so much, Mrs. Goldman, Mrs. Matson, and Mr. Marchant for coming up here.
Thank you. We've enjoyed it.
You're quite welcome. Well, there you have it. We've been talking turkey with Mrs. Olive Remington Goldman, Mrs. Rosser H. Matson, and also to Mr. Reynolds Marchant, all of the Bureau of Civil Defense, from the federal to the local angle.